Our world is consumed with the concept of luck. Chance happenings that just kind of take place. People will regularly say, boy, you sure are lucky. Or the opposite, something is bad luck. But the book of Esther says that there is no such thing as luck. There is providence. God causing or allowing things and events to work toward his purposes. Esther has been promoted to be queen. Mordecai has told her that Haman wants to kill all of the Jews. And it's now time for you to go to your husband, King Ahasuerus, and tell him Haman's plot against the Jews. Esther has said, I can't do that. It's too risky. I love y'all, but not that much. Because to go before him when he has not requested me could cost me my life. Mordecai has said to her, don't you know that you are called to the kingdom for such a time as this? That you were only put up here in this royal position because God knew this moment, your moment would be now. Don't miss your moment, girl. This is your moment to be a tool of God to deliver God's people. When she hears that message from Mordecai, she says, okay, I want all of y'all to go on a 3-day fast. I need y'all on your knees for this one because this is a big one. You're asking me to risk it all, and I'm going to go do it, and if I perish, I perish. If I die, I die, because you're right. This is bigger than just me. Chapter 5 opens up on the 3rd day, because it was a 3-day fast. Esther puts on a royal robe. She goes to the inner court of the king. The king is sitting on his throne. When the king sees her in verse 2, he extends the scepter, which means it's okay for her to come in and talk to him. She comes near, touches the top of the scepter out of respect. And then the king says to her, what is troubling you? Verse 3, Queen Esther. And what is your request? Even to half of the kingdom, it will be given you. Just tell me what you want. Esther says in verse 4, if it pleases the king, may the king and Haman, who is out to kill the Jews, come this day to the banquet that I have prepared for him. I'm going to tell you around dinner. I'm going to fix your favorite food. We're going to lay it out, and I want you to bring Haman. And I'm going to tell you then what's going on around dinner. You will never get to see God's providence at work in your circumstances until and unless God sees you move in accordance with his will. The reason she prays first is because she needs to know how to approach this dangerous situation. She needs some divine insight in a difficult problem. So she goes to God in fasting. And this was a life and death issue. So she needed her antenna raised to hear what God had to say about this situation. The second thing he needs you to do is take a step of faith. But she couldn't just say, I'm a fast, I'm a pray, and I'm going to wait on God. No, she was instructed to go before the king. She had to take a step of faith. So she trusts God. She believes God. She prays to God. And then she makes a risky step because there are no guarantees in advance. What does she get in return? Well, so far, what she gets is a plan. The plan is, I'm going to take my husband to dinner and I'm going to tell him to invite my enemy, Haman. In other words, I'm going to get Haman on home court advantage. I got to get Haman on my territory. She says, okay, it's a banquet. It's a dinner. Okay, bring Haman to dinner and let's go from there. So she invites her husband and her enemy to dinner. Guess who's coming to dinner? So, the banquet is prepared. And they drank their wine, verse 6, at the banquet. So this is a big dinner party for her husband. And the king said to Esther, what is your petition? Okay, you brought me here to dinner. You done fed me good. What do you want? For it shall be granted to you. And I mean, I'm going to do it big, because whatever your request, even the half of the kingdom, it will be done. I'm going to take care of you. What did you make this dinner for? Ooh, it's getting tricky now. Verse 7. So Esther replied, my petition and my request is. My petition and my request is, watch this, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and do what I request, may the king and Haman come to the banquet which I have prepared for them tomorrow. Say, what? The man just told you he gonna give you half the kingdom. What you want, girl? She says, king, my request is, can we have dinner tomorrow? Wait a minute. She made the dinner to make her request to save the people from the genocide of Haman. She's got them both sitting there. Dinner is fine. They've been doing their drinking. Everybody's ready to go. He's offered her the kingdom. What do you want? And she says, what I want is for you to come to dinner tomorrow. Something happened between verse 6 and 8 to cause her to change her mind about making her petition. She changes her mind because she doesn't even finish the sentence. She just jumps to, let's do this again tomorrow. So I know your question is, what changed her mind? She pauses and says, come back tomorrow. Something is happening here. Well, Haman is now smelling himself. Because Haman went out, verse 9, glad and pleased of heart. He's saying, whoa. He says, boy, I was invited to eat with the king and his wife. Boy, I'm really rising on the ladder here. The problem is when he goes out, he runs into Mordecai. Verse 9, and Mordecai would not stand up, not respect him. The man is out to kill him. Mordecai's not going to stand up. Haman was filled with anger against Mordecai. So he already doesn't like him. Now he really ticked off because I didn't come from this party with the king, with the queen. I'm standing before you and you don't recognize who I am, and they just invited me to be with them. You don't know who I am. So he is ticked off, but he controls himself. Verse 10, he doesn't let it. He goes home and tells his wife. He says, wife, Zeresh, he says, let me tell you about my day. I am the man. I am the man. Look, I'm rich. We got these 10 sons. He says, verse 11, and the king magnified me and promoted me, and I'm above all the servants. And then guess what, baby? Verse 12, Esther, the queen, had me, no one but me come to be with the king to eat dinner. Oh, yeah, I'm boss. I'm the boss man, girl. I am on it. This is my day. But there is one problem. All this doesn't matter to me because this Mordecai, the Jew, sitting at the king's gate. And I can't stand it. I can't take it any longer. So his wife says, look, we got to get rid of Mordecai. You build the gallows and we're going to kill him tomorrow. We're going to kill him. During that night, chapter 6, verse 1, the king could not sleep. This is just not a regular night. This is on a particular night. Insomnia sets in. And so the king needs help to go to sleep. So according to verse number 1, he tells his servant, go get me something boring to read. God is so detailed in his coincidences. He leads the servants to the right book. And he makes them read the right page. And on the page that they read, it was found written, verse 2, what Mordecai had reported concerning Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who were doorkeepers, that they had sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. That goes all the way back to chapter 2 when Mordecai uncovered an assassination plot against the king, and it just happened to be written in the book, in the Chronicles, on the page from the book that he had them read that night, not a night, that night he could not sleep. Okay, I know it's just luck. I know it's just chance. I know it's just something that just kind of happened. I got that. So he's reading the book because of his insomnia. And it just happens that when they hit Mordecai, king said, whoa. You've been reading all these names and all these events, but this guy Mordecai, he saved my life, right? Yeah, king. Well, tell me, verse 3, how did we honor him? How did we tell him we appreciate him for saving the king's life? Servant said, we didn't do anything for him. What? You see, God's providence is tied to time. Even though the time may go over years. Because this is years. Even though you thought something should happen 5 years ago or 8 years ago, but God is doing more than just you. He's doing a series of things at the same time because his kingdom is bigger than just you. You are not the kingdom. You are a representative in the kingdom to be used by the kingdom for the kingdom, but you're not the only one in the kingdom. And so timing becomes everything. And so now we find ourselves when on the day, because night is now past, on the day Mordecai is supposed to die, he's reading a book with Mordecai's name in it just because he can't sleep on that night. Okay, watch this. The king asked in verse 4, I hear somebody outside. Who's outside in the court? It's early in the morning. Who would be up this early out there? Who's there? Who's in the court? He asked in verse 4. Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace in order to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows which he had prepared for him. King's servant say in verse 5, King, behold, Haman is standing at the door. Let him come in. Tell Haman come in. He my number 2 guy. Let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said to him, what is to be done for the man who the king desires to honor? What is to be done with the man who the king decides to honor? Now, Haman thinks the king is talking about him. Haman thinks the king is talking about him. He's number 2. He's the number 2 guy in the land. We learned that early in the book. So the king says he wants to honor somebody. So Haman, because he's smelling himself. King want to honor me. Okay. Let me go for the gusto. You want to honor somebody, O king? Let me tell you what you should do. Here's what you should do, O king. Bring out the royal robe. Let him wear the king's robe, which the king has worn. Then bring him the horse on which the king rides. Then put a royal crown even on the horse. Then let the robe and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble princesses, and let them array the man whom the king desires to honor, and lead him on horseback through the city square, and proclaim before him, thus it shall be done to the man whom the king desires to honor. And so what happens? The king says, then the king said to Haman, verse 10, take quickly the robes and the horse, as you have said, and do so for Mordecai the Jew. Dum 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 dum. Yeah, what you just said, I like that, hey. I like that, hey, why don't you go and do it for Mordecai the Jew? My Bernie Mac invitation, not that invitation. Just go ahead and do it for Mordecai the Jew. Listen to me, seriously. God is the God of intersections. He connects things that don't look connectable when it's that night. When the timing is hit just right and everything is looking wrong. See, everything is looking wrong. Mordecai's getting ready to die this morning. Esther has had to shift her plan to another dinner. This is not a good day. But she has gone before God. She has acted in faith. And so she's picking up signals that causes her to delay a dinner. She's picking up signals. So Haman, verse 11, took the robe, took the horse, arrayed Mordecai, and led him on horse back through the city square, and proclaimed before him, thus it shall be done to the man whom the king desires to honor. Okay, so let's follow Mordecai. There's a man the king want to honor. That's called making your enemies your footstool. Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman hurried home mourning with his head covered. Told his wife Zeresh, this is what happened today. This whole thing is reversed. His wife Zeresh says, well, yeah, it looks bad for you, boy. She says, because you've fallen before this Jewish man. You've fallen before this Jewish man. Brothers and sisters, this is 24 hours. So he's walking this Jew around. Okay. Why am I telling you that? Because I'm telling you the providence of God can even address racism. Okay, don't miss me. The providence of God, because we got racism. He wants to genocide all of the Jews because they are Jewish. It was religion, but it was racism. They were Jewish. The providence of God can handle racism. It was the providence of God in 1955 when a woman named Rosa Parks happened to be on the bus, happened to have a man talk to her. She happened to not be willing to get up, which led to a civil rights movement, which changed the laws of the land. God knows how, when he gets the right people with the right faith at the right time in the right place to do the right thing, to flip the script even racially. Okay, it's about 1969, around 1969. One of my professors in college asked me to go to a church with him, to his church around 1969. I went with my professor. I go inside the church, and when I walk out of the church, all hell breaks loose because blacks were not allowed in the church. My professor didn't agree with that. He asked me when I would go. I went. I didn't know all this. So I went, and the church went into convulsions. Because this is, coming off the civil rights era and all that. And they went into convulsions over this black man coming into the church. So they had a meeting about what the church's official position was going to be, and there was a split among the leaders and among the congregation. On the Sunday that I went, they had a guest preacher who was candidating to be their new pastor. I didn't know who was going to be preaching, but he was candidating to be their new pastor. He preached. They had all planned to bring him in. He found out their position in light of me going to the church. He wrote the church and says, I cannot pastor a racist church. So he said, I'm not coming to this church. That split the church even more. From that day forward, the church began to go downhill, 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 until it became a glorified Bible study. 5 years ago, I get a phone call from the chairman of the deacon board. He says, our church has never recovered from that day you came with the professor. And we recognize the reason God has not answered our prayers, the reason God has not rebuilt our church, is because of the racism that we did to you way back in 1969. So I have been asked on behalf of the deacons to call you to apologize to you for the racism we did to you back in 1969. And I am calling you, and I'm humbly requesting, would you come preach? Because God knows the right time to turn a situation around. I'm trying to tell you, you don't know who you're dealing with. Israel had been in the wilderness for 40 years. 40 years for them to learn faith. 40 years for their habits to be corrected. 40 years for them to be humbled. 40 years for them to be trained. And now it was time to cross over at the end of the 40th year. And what a miracle crossover it was. I mean, it was something to behold. Because we're told when they crossed over the Jordan, they crossed over the Jordan in flood season. Now, if there's any time you don't want to cross the Jordan, it's in flood season. That's the most dangerous time. That's the time when you're most likely to run into a problem or to drown. It was the time when the human capacity would be at its lowest. But I just want you to know God does some of his best work in flood season. When the waters are too high, the problems are too great, the needs are too daunting. In other words, where it's beyond you, where God makes it hard in order for you to see there's only one God, and you and I, we are not he. And so it was in flood season that God would perform this miracle. It was no different than when the children of Israel crossed the Red Sea. They got Pharaoh coming on one end. They got the Red Sea on the other end. They're in a catch-22. They're in a conundrum. They can go neither way and find a solution that unless God shows up and does something supernatural. So by way of application, if you happen today to be in flood season, being overwhelmed by life's realities and life's circumstance, you may not be in as bad position as it looks, because it may be the impeccable season for the Almighty God to demonstrate how exactly almighty he is. So God told them in flood season to tell the priests to take the Ark of the Covenant, which contained the 10 Commandments, the Word of God, and to tell the priests to put their foot in the bank of the Jordan. Why? Because before you can ever see what God does in flood season, he wants to see you walking by faith. He doesn't want to see you talking by faith or feeling by faith. He wants to see you moving by faith. So he says, let the priests put their foot on the bank. I got to see that they're going to trust me. And so he gets these representatives, the principle of representation. So the representatives on behalf of the nation put their foot in the Jordan, and a couple of miracles took place. During flood season, God blocked the water from flowing down the Jordan River, so that now God walled them off, dammed them up, so that the water would stop flowing. That was one miracle in and of itself. But then the Bible says they crossed over on dry land. Not wet land, dry land. It had to be land where they could walk over and their feet not get muddy, where they could roll wheelbarrows of their goods and not get stuck in the mud, where horses could still trot across, walk across, and run across and not get stuck in waters that for years and centuries and decades had been wet. But the Bible says God not only dammed the water, he hardened the soil so that when they walked over on dry land. You need to understand who we're dealing with here. And it all happened in flood season. It was in this context of the supernatural intervention of God that God tells Joshua to get a representative, again, the principle of representative, where the leaders would represent the 12 tribes of Israel, to go back into the dry Jordan and pick up a boulder, a stone. Now, this wasn't a pebble. This was a major stone because he had to carry it. It says each one on his shoulder. So it was a major rock. And he says, what I want you to do with this rock is I want you to build a memorial. I want you to build stones of remembrance. I want you to build something so you'll never forget what was done here and who did it. I want you never to forget that the only way you got to where you are from where you came from is because God brought you in flood season from where you were to where you are. I don't want you to get the big head. I don't want you to think that it is by your power or your might that you are in this place 40 years later. I want you to have a perpetual reminder that the only reason you are where you are today versus where you were 40 years ago is because I supernaturally intervened into your situation. Now, why does God want to tell Joshua to build a memorial? Because God knows we are subject to forget. God knows we're prone to forget. And while you may forget a lot of things in life, God is not the one you want to forget. I want to show you a few other scriptures that drives this home. In Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 9, we're told these words, only give heed to yourself, and keep your soul diligent so that you do not forget the things which your eyes have seen, and that they do not depart from your heart all the days of your life, but make them known to your sons and your grandsons. In chapter 6, verse 10, then it shall come about when the Lord your God brings you into the land which he swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you great and splendid cities which you did not build, and houses full of all good things which you did not fill, and hew cisterns which you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees which you did not plant, and you eat and are satisfied. Then watch yourself, that you do not forget the Lord who brought you from the land of Egypt out of the house of slavery. Look at chapter 8, verse 11. Beware that you do not forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments, his ordinances, and his statutes, which I am commanding you today. Verse 14. Then your heart will become proud, and you will forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Verse 18, but you shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who is giving you power to make wealth, that he may confirm his covenant, which he swore to your fathers, as it is this day. It shall come about, if you ever forget the Lord your God and go after other gods and serve them and worship them, I surely against you today will testify, and you shall surely perish like the nations that the Lord makes to perish before you. Do you get the message? You better not forget. I like that phrase in chapter 6. You better watch yourself, because it's easy to forget. It's easy to think you're your own source. It's easy to think it's all on you, about you, from you, to you, through you, and because of you. It's easy when you've gone from nothing to something to forget how you got there. Don't forget that God is your source. Don't forget that where you are now compared to where you were when you met me is not the same place, because I walk with you. Even in your rebellion, even in your disobedience, even in your disregard, he says, I fed you in the wilderness. I clothed you in the wilderness. I preserved you even when you were out of fellowship with me. So he says, in fact, if the truth were told, if many of us would have got what we deserve, we wouldn't even be here today. If God didn't protect us in that situation, deliver us out of that situation, we wouldn't even be here today. But because God oversaw us and didn't let what could have happen, and he preserved us and walked us through it, he says, don't you forget. And so he tells them, I want you to build the stone a memorial. He says, do not forget the goodness of God, that he alone is your source. And when we align ourselves to God like he wants us to align ourselves to him, he says, you will see me even in flood season. Demonstrate your glory. So he sends them to get the stones. You know, we believe in reminders. We have Memorial Day parades. You know, that's a reminder of the people who have sacrificed their lives for our freedom in America. And so they have because they don't want you to forget. There's an Independence Day parade on July 4th and all kind of independence celebrations to remind us of the battle from England that led to the founding of the nation. Why? Because they don't want you to forget. When I was in Washington, D.C. not too long ago, there are memorials. There's the Jefferson Memorial, the Lincoln Memorial, the Martin Luther King Memorial. Why? So you don't forget. They've got the great statements by these statesmen on the walls so that you can be reminded of what it took for us to be here. What they're trying to say is we don't want you to forget. What God is saying is if men who come and go don't want you to forget them, what do you think about the God who doesn't want you to forget him? Because let me tell you the big difference between folk who don't want to be forgotten and God who says, don't forget me. The folk who don't want to be forgotten, when they're gone, they're gone. You can't go to them for anything else. You can't reach them. You couldn't even reach them when they were alive. You sure can't reach them now that they've died. So they can do absolutely nothing from their memorial. But the God who brought you from yesterday is alive today, and you're going to need him tomorrow, so you better not forget. See, that's the problem today. The problem today is everybody wants to remember God for what he can give them, not for who he is. In flood season, when you were between a rock and a hard place at the Red Sea, when you didn't know how you were going to get out of this one, when you didn't know whether you were going to make it, when other folk gave up on you and you saw no way out, remember that I showed up and I met you in that place. Do not forget the Lord your God. And so, gather the stones. Gather the stones, and when you gather these stones, there's going to be a question. And the question is, what do these stones mean? A memorial should always provoke a question. What does this mean? We have trophies in the fellowship center. We got a trophy case, all kind of trophies from different things. Different teams have won from our sports ministries. Trophies. People don't even stop at the trophy case anymore. You know, you know they're there if you've been over there, but you don't stop to read it anymore. You know why? Because all of that is representative of the past. Every trophy in there is yesterday's news. And so you know they're there, but you don't go read them anymore. You don't go look at them. Even the people who participate in the championship, don't revisit them. Because it's yesterday's news. The reason why God doesn't want to forget you is that he's not just yesterday's news. I love his name. He told Moses, I am that I am. I, personal pronoun, am present tense. He's the right now God. So his trophy cases continue to be filled with current day realities of his presence and purpose in our lives individually and as a community. He's never old news. He says, I want you to build a memorial to remember, to cause my people to remember that I am the right now God, based on the past. So he told Israel, circumcise your sons and every generation after that. He said, remember the Passover. And then in the New Testament, Jesus says around communion, remember me. Why? Because of what I do right now, based on what I have already done. Everybody has a phone and everybody has a smartphone, which means everybody taking pictures of everything all the time. Pictures. Everybody takes pictures. You know why people take pictures? To build memories. You take pictures because you want to remember something or someone or some circumstance. We got to be the most picture-taking family in the history of picture-taking families. We got volumes and volumes and volumes and volumes of picture books from over the years. I was looking with my son Anthony through one about a year ago. We're going through his, and I guess every kid got their own book. And we were going through, and one picture after another, and one picture after another, one picture after another. And he looked at me and he said, Daddy. I said, what? He said, we're going through this book, and I just noticed something. I said, what? He said, every page, you're there with me. You've been there all my life. If you turn the pages of your life and look close enough, you'll discover your Heavenly Father has been there all your life. Even in your unsaved days, you were covered enough for you to be here today. And so he says, I want you to build this memorial. And then he throws a zinger. He says, when your children ask you, what do these stones mean? Then you will say, because of the waters of Jordan were cut off, before the covenant of the Lord, it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off, so these stones shall become a memorial to the sons of Israel forever. We are supposed to have a transferable faith. It's supposed to be transferred from one generation to the next generation. You know why we're in the chaos we're in today? Because there has been a transfer problem. We have a generation of young people who have not had their faith transferred by their mothers or fathers. And so there is a massive transfer problem. In verse 24, I love this. He says that all the people on the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, so that you may fear the Lord your God forever. Ooh, watch this. Watch this. Israel, I'm going to bless you. Even though in the promised land, you're going to be surrounded by evil. They're going to be this Jericho, there's Ai, there's all these evil people, the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites. They still in the promised land. You surrounded by evil. But in the middle of the evil that surrounds you, I got you. You got evil all around you, but I got you. But the reason I have you is so that the rest of the world may know. All them fools out there, all the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, I want them to know that I am in your midst. Because I want them to hear stories about you. I want them to hear the miracles I'm doing in your midst. I want them to hear the transformation of lives, the marriages that are saved, the dignity that is arising up, the spirituality that's taking place. I want to show off so that when they see out there what I'm doing in here, my name will be made great out there because I'm making it great in here. God has given us this promised land on Camp Wisdom, but it's just not for you and me. It's so that God can keep doing miracles on Camp Wisdom so the rest of Oak Cliff and Dallas and America can say, oh, God is showing up at 1800 block of Camp Wisdom because he keeps showing up there. How y'all able to do that? How you able to pay for that? How you able to change that? How you able to impact that? How you have the ability to own that? How do you ability to do that? And we can give testimony. It is to the Lord our God who met us in flood season. In your home, you may be surrounded by evil, but God says if you remember the Lord your God, even in your house, when you say, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. I don't care what the rest of the homes are doing around me. He says, I will make your home great because you remembered me, even though you're surrounded by all kind of evil. So don't you be ashamed of God. Don't you be ashamed to name his name. Don't you be ashamed to do good works in his name. Don't you be ashamed to praise him. Don't you be ashamed to glorify him. Fatherlessness dominates our cultural landscape today. 40% of all children in our country are raised without their biological father. In the African American community, 72% of children born are born to single parents. Whether you're looking at crime statistics or dropout statistics or teenage pregnancy statistics or poverty statistics, over and over and over again, the dominating reality of fatherlessness overwhelms us. Now, fatherlessness comes in many shapes and many forms. Some are fatherless because they've been abandoned by their father. Their father sired a child that they were not willing to take responsibility for. Other forms of fatherlessness is that the father may be there, but he might as well not be there because he's not accepted the responsibility of fatherhood. And so what we have developed is a generation of young people, children, who are growing up in a fatherless environment, and so they go seeking pseudo-fatherhood. Things that look like it could be a father for me, whether it's a gang or whether it's their posse or their homies or whether some other influence that's not in their best interest. Fatherlessness has become the daunting, overwhelming, painful reality of our culture that is fraying us. When God created man, before he gave him a wife and gave him children, he gave him the responsibility to act on his behalf. But now we have men who are simply satisfied to say, I'm not happy. Let me take a moment to talk about happy. I'm not against happy. I'm for happy. You should want to be happy. There's no benefit to being miserable. On the other hand, happy is not your first order of business. Your first order of business is to be responsible, whether or not you're happy. Because the measure of a man is his acceptance of responsibility under God as he seeks to be happy. But what we are having today are men, because they're no longer happy, abandoning responsibility. And so we are finding ourselves enveloped in a cursed environment because of the crisis of fatherlessness. In our passage today, we have a son begging for the blessing of his father. Esau is begging for a blessing. You must strip your mind about the casual use of the word bless. We say, God bless you, I bless you. We use the word fairly casually today many times. But when Esau was asking Daddy to bless him, he wasn't just saying, Daddy, say, I bless you. No, the blessing was speaking about something else. It was speaking about the continuity of the covenant. A symbol for the word blessing was covenantal continuity. Let me explain what I mean. It is my hope that every head of a household here has a will. If you do not have a will, you're not operating responsibly. A will simply says, this is what I want to happen with what I've been entrusted with to pass on to the next generation. A will speaks of an inheritance, usually related to stuff. In fact, folk gather when wills are read with their fingers crossed, hoping that there's a little something in there for them. Or more importantly, a whole lot of something in there for them. In our story, Jacob, the younger, wants the blessing. So he concocts a plan with his mother, Rebekah, to steal the blessing from the older son, Esau. And so while Esau went out to hunt to get food in order to bring it back to his father, for him to get the blessing, Rebekah told Jacob, look, what you do is you go get me a goat. I'll cook the meal. You go put on your brother's clothes because your father can't see. It says his eyes were dim. He won't be able to see. You go in there with your brother's clothes and you bring the meal that your brother's supposed to bring and let him bless you. So Jacob does that. He goes, gets the goat. The mother cooks the goat. He goes, puts on his brother's clothes. He walks in. His father Isaac says, who's that? Who's that? Who's that? And Jacob says, no, it's me. It's Esau, your oldest son. He says, I have your food. He says, come close to me. He says, now you feel like Esau, but you sound like Jacob. It says in verse 23, he did not recognize him. And so he blesses him. I'll talk about that in a moment. All I want you to get now is how critical the blessing was. He was willing to join partners with his mama against his daddy in order to get it. Because this thing involved his future. Now this raises a question. Because obviously Jacob is wrong and Rebekah is wrong because they're tricking Isaac. Yet, throughout the Bible, God praises Jacob and not Esau, even though Jacob is doing the wrong thing. The question is why? Well, you need chapter 25 to answer that. If you go back a page to chapter 25, verse 27, when the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the field. He's the athlete. Jacob was a peaceful man living in tents. Now, Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for game, because he's the athlete, and Rebekah loved Jacob. When Jacob had cooked stew, because he's hanging with mama, so when he had cooked stew, Esau came in from the field and was famished, starving. So Esau says to Jacob, verse 30, please let me have a swallow of that red stuff there, for I am famished. Verse 31, Jacob says, first sell me your birthright. Sell me the rights of the firstborn, and I give you something to eat. Esau said, behold, I'm about to die. I'm so hungry. So of what use is a birthright to me if I'm a starve to death? And Jacob said, first swear to me that you'll give me your birthright, the rights of the firstborn. So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went on his way. Here it is. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Esau thought so little of his birthright, he was willing to give it up for some food. As far as Esau was concerned, stay with me, there was no connection between my birthright and my blessing. My birthright is over here and my blessing is over there. But when you read Hebrews chapter 12, verses 16 and 17, it says, don't be like the immoral, godless Esau, who sold his birthright for food. The problem with Esau is he was only present oriented. He only wanted what he wanted now because he wasn't thinking about the future later. One of the problems we have among men is they're present oriented. I'm not happy now. I don't want the responsibility now. It's all about now. It's not all about now. It is about you passing forward the blessing. That is the divine statement of God from you, to you, and through you, because you are future oriented. He gets tricked, but God doesn't interfere with it because he didn't value his birthright. Now you may say, I don't have a birthright. Oh yeah, you do. If you've accepted Jesus Christ, you've been born again. You possess a birthright. There are rights and privileges that come with your new birth, but those rights and privileges incur responsibility. And sometimes you'll be happy, and sometimes you won't be happy, but what's that got to do? Sometimes you want to work, and sometimes you don't want to work. You better get up if you want to eat. In other words, responsibility has to function whether or not happiness is part of the equation. Although there's nothing wrong with being happy. But that means you must be future oriented if you're going to pass on the blessing. And so we have Esau begging for a blessing. I mean, he's saying, please, Daddy. How many men here today were raised by a single mother? You were raised by a single mother. Numbers of you. And praise God for the great job that so many of our single women do. But all a mother can be is the best mother she can be. She was never meant to have dual roles when there should be a man in the picture. He says, Father, bless me. Because that's what the father is supposed to do. He's supposed to pass it on. And the next generation should feel God all over them. If you've got kids in your house, pass that on to me. Now, what did the blessing include? In chapter 27, we're told. First of all, his father kissed him, verse 26. Please come close and kiss me. Because the blessing included an intimate touch. He says, here's the blessing, my son. Verse 28 and 29, may God give you of the dew of heaven, of the fatness of earth, of the abundance of grain and wine. May people serve you and nations bow down to you. May you be master of your brethren, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed is he who curses you, and blessed are those who bless you. God reached all the way back to the Abrahamic covenant. Abraham passed it on to Isaac. Isaac is now passing it on to Jacob, where it should have been passed on to Esau, who turned away his birthright. You know what the covenant was? You know what the blessing was? Divine favor moving forward. Divine favor moving forward. The blessing was future inheritance from God. Please notice the language. May God do this. May God do that. May God do this. May God do that. See, that's where the blessing is missing. We're just saying, I want you to do this and I want you to do that. Oh, you want to be a doctor. You want to be a lawyer. You want to be an engineer. You want to be a teacher. Nothing wrong with that. But the blessing was what God would do. I want God to do this. I want God to do that. I want God to do the other. I want God. It was about God, 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 God. Not just what I want for you or what you want for you, but what God wants for you. That was the blessing. Because it would happen because of God. Whenever you see a caterpillar, it's got a glorious future. Now I know what you're looking at right now ain't much. When that thing cocoons, it's going to be pretty. And it's going to take flight. You got a generation of children who don't take flight. They're still crawling because they've never been blessed. They've never had the blessing stand over them to affirm them and to speak God into them. Not just stuff for them, but God into them who will bring them the appropriate stuff. Your will must be more than stuff. My will must be more than stuff. It must be God and the transfer of divine favor. When I was growing up in Baltimore, we went duck pin bowling. Now things were pretty rinky-dink. This wasn't high-class bowling. And a lot of the times machines didn't fully work. So pins, sometimes all of them wouldn't get picked up. So some would still be laying down. Other time, the machine would pick them up and one would drop out of it and fall back down. There was this guy. Now, you couldn't see him. All you could see is his feet. And all he went was from lane to lane, picking up pins that the machine couldn't get. So he running to this lane, running to that lane, running to this lane. He picking up stuff that got knocked down and that the machine couldn't pick up so the next person could bowl. I don't care how long you've been knocked down. I know somebody who can pick you back up and set you right again because he wants you to have the blessing. The forward-moving favor of God commuted to you so you can commute it to yours. I've told the men how much I love Rocky 5. And I love all the Rockies, but really love Rocky 5. In Rocky 5, Rocky is retired because he's gotten bruised and beaten. His eye is bad. He can't fight anymore in Rocky 5. He comes across a young upcoming fighter named Tommy Gunn. And Tommy Gunn has admired Rocky Balboa as he followed his career. And so they meet and become friends. And he says to Rocky Balboa, Rocky, Italian Stallion, will you train me? Rocky said, boy, yeah, I can stay in the fight game by helping you. So yeah, I'll train you. So Rocky works with him, and Tommy Gunn goes up the ladder, up the ladder, up the ladder, and becomes the heavyweight champion of the world due to the influence of Rocky Balboa. The movie comes down to the last 15 minutes. The whole movie zeroes in on that last 15 minutes. See, Tommy Gunn has now become the champion of the world and has gotten to his head. So he's gotten a lot of money now, and he's gotten a lot of attention, a lot of notoriety in the news. So Tommy Gunn is living large, and he doesn't need Rocky anymore. In fact, he gets belligerent with Rocky. In that last 15 minutes, they're in a gathering, and Tommy Gunn hits Rocky Balboa's wife's husband, his brother-in-law. I mean, he clocks him and knocks him down because of some argument they were having. Then Tommy Gunn insults Rocky and insults Rocky's son. Then Tommy Gunn dares Rocky to do anything about it. Rocky tears off his shirt, and the rumble begins. They out in the street fighting each other. It's a street fight. The problem is Tommy Gunn is too young, too strong, and too fast. And so while Rocky is doing the best he can't keep up with this young guy. And so it comes down to a punch that Tommy Gunn throws, and he hits